everyone. I'm William Hurd. I'm a senior here at Loveland High School. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. So first we have Dr. Steve Fegans. Steve Fegans, a medical doctor. He's the medical director of Hamilton County Public Health. Next up, Jessica Skelton, Hamilton County Public Health, and she's a tobacco specialist. Next, we have Loveland High School's school resource officer, Officer Jesse Moore, and then a prevention specialist with the AmeriCorps Public Allies, working as a prevention specialist with Prevention First, Lauren Oshel. Gotcha. All right. So I want to, we're all here to discuss nicotine addiction and how it affects the community as a whole and the youth within the community, and resources for those who use nicotine products to help quit using e-cigs and the products. All right. So let's get started on our questions. All right. So question number one is for Dr. Steve Fegans. What is nicotine?
Okay, I think you guys all probably know what nicotine is. But you may not know it comes from the nightshade family of plants, and there's actually nicotine in tomatoes and actually potatoes and other things at very low amounts, but it comes in high amounts, anywhere from 0.5% to even 5% in tobacco plants. And nicotine is a neurotoxin. In some places it's used as a pesticide. It's also an analgesic, an anxiolytic, and many other things. There's a nicotine receptor that is responsible for the main effects of nicotine, as well as the tolerance, dependence, and ultimately addiction of nicotine. And so you guys are pretty familiar with that. For years, we've had smoking. In fact, it's one of the first plants that we ever had in America was a tobacco plant. Cigarettes are actually the only product in America, when used as directed, kills 50% of the users who use the product long term. And so I think what we're trying to, as a physician, I talk to people all day long, and no one really wants to know how bad smoking is. They want to know how to quit. They want how to stop, which I think is what we're talking about tonight.
All right, our next question. How does nicotine affect adults, youth, and the differences in between?
So nicotine, it does allow you to be a little bit more alert. That's why people smoke. It also causes you to increase your heart rate, and it's a vasoconstrictor. And so whether you're smoking combustible cigarettes or vaping nicotine-containing liquids, you're still vasoconstricting. So it turns out that e-cigarettes have the same effect on cardiovascular vasospasm and heart disease as does regular cigarettes. And that's an interesting finding. In fact, we don't use nicotine replacement therapy in people who are coming out of heart surgery or who just had a heart attack, because even nicotine replacement causes a significant endothelial vasoconstriction. And so it has some pretty adverse effects in both youth and adults. In adolescence, as the adolescent brain is forming, nicotine can significantly affect that, and so that's one of the biggest reasons why we really recommend against nicotine use in any form in those under the age of 21.
All right. What are the side effects of nicotine or nicotine addiction?
Okay, so nicotine is one of the most addicting chemicals. There are receptors for opiates, there are receptors for alcohol, and there are nicotine receptors. And of those three, the nicotine causes the most significant dependence and the most significant addiction. And so it's very difficult. It's the most difficult to actually give up nicotine. I'll tell you, we're talking about vaping, and about 2 months ago, I got a call from a colleague who said, "Do you think vaping can cause lung problems?" I have a patient here, and I'm not sure what's wrong, but they've been vaping. And now they're in lung failure. And that was actually the first time I had ever heard of the potential for vaping-associated lung injury. You guys all know about that now. We've talked about that. We'll probably talk a lot more about that tonight. But the big thing about vaping or use of nicotine in adolescence is now that many folks are aware that it's a bad thing, that they want to stop. and they stop suddenly. They may not have even told people, or people don't know that they've been using a Juul or some type of vaping. And when they do, they go into nicotine withdrawal. They don't even know what that is. In fact, the nicotine withdrawal associated with adolescent nicotine use is something we haven't really studied yet. And so we'll talk more about that tonight, but that's some of the key effects.
What are the side effects of nicotine or nicotine addiction? Oh, I just asked that, sorry. Are you able to see the signs of nicotine addiction in adults? Are you able to see the signs of nicotine addiction in adults?
Yeah, we see it every day. I mean, you guys see that. The big part is it's the nicotine in the cigarette that addicts you. It's the tar that kills you. So combustible cigarettes, the most significant killer part is the tar. But nicotine itself, it causes fast heart rates, causes shortness of breath, causes vasoconstriction as described, which can all have themselves significant effects. The biggest issue in adolescence, of course, is the developing brain.
All right. Lost my Okay. So the signs of addiction are different when talking about youth?
Yes, so the signs of addiction can be a little bit different when talking about youth. Everyone, of course, goes through withdrawal, but when there is somebody who's a youth that is addicted, a lot of times that's seen by their everyday activities changing. So you may see somebody whose grades all of a sudden start declining. You may see somebody who all of a sudden becomes withdrawn from their friends. Maybe they don't want to hang out or go to the movies or anything on the weekend anymore. They kind of stay shut up in their room. They may be not studying or anything like that. So that is a major sign that you start seeing in adolescents in particular. Then they almost become, they can even become depressed when they become addicted. And they just kind of, that's all they think about. And it's kind of how their mind starts to work. They kind of get withdrawn. You'll see the grades decline. You might see mood swings happen. And then that's usually a very, common sign for adolescents who become addicted to nicotine products or tobacco products.
Since the addictive substance is nicotine, where is that nicotine? Where can it be found?
So nicotine is in quite a few different products, as Dr. Fagans mentioned earlier. Particular for youth, there's a lot of youth who have a tendency to use e-cigarettes, of course, so like Juul and other vaping devices. And then there's also little cigars that are very popular among youth. A lot of times these items are flavored, which gets a lot of youth more involved, and they also become more highly addicted simply because it's something flavored. It's a little bit less harsh than a traditional cigarette or a combustible cigarette. And so those kind of things actually really get the youth more addicted because they're able to use it more frequently without the side effects of, say, a regular cigarette would, harming the lungs or making it harder for you to breathe as quickly. So a lot of times these, like the little cigarellos or the Swisher Sweets, or you have vapes that are flavored, e-cigarettes that are flavored, those are the ones that the youth nowadays are really using quite frequently.
All right. Jessica, you mentioned that increased use of e-cigarettes or vapes among youth. Why do you think that this is the case?
So right now, e-cigarettes have been around since about 2007 here in the U.S., and then they didn't take off really. So they were kind of about remarketed. These are the ones that came back out in around 2015, and they start looking like USB drives. They looked like cards and different types that came back out, and that's when they started really marketing flavors. And in about 2017 is when Juul really hit the market. So Juul is the most commonly known name for the brand of e-cigarette right now. So they have a large percentage of the market when it comes to e-cigarettes. So these are the ones that a lot of kids will be using right now, and that's the one they recognize. Even if they don't use a product by Juul, they still usually call it Juul. So it is something heard very frequently nowadays. And then once that happened and the flavors got really common, a lot of the kids were seeing them, and they were being promoted on social media. A lot of times to people who were not above the age of 18 at that time, and you see them all the time on your social feeds, people have the tendency to want to try things they see on social media, of course, and they see their friends trying, and they just get interested in it. So once 2017 hit and all the flavors started hitting, a lot of teens were very interested, and they just started trying them. And as Dr. Fegans mentioned earlier, nicotine is highly addictive. So these kids who are out there trying these different flavors and these different items, they ended up getting addicted very quickly because they didn't realize how addictive the substance was. So they may have something that's watermelon or mango or cotton candy flavored, even unicorn flavored is one of the ones out there. And they end up trying these items and these products, and they end up getting addicted very quickly.
What is unicorn flavor?
So there is actually, I know there's a few of them out there. They're very interesting. So there's actually one called unicorn vomit and unicorn poop. Very interesting. I'm not really sure the actual flavor, but it's almost like a mixed fruit flavor. Of course, I have not tried it to tell you exactly, but it is.
That just
very
seems bad on
interesting.
many levels.
Yes, it does. I mean, it's a very interesting flavor. I would not want to have anything that is called unicorn vomit. So it's very interesting.
Thank you. With this increased use of vapes, Officer Moore, would you like to provide some insight into what's being seen in schools?
Yeah, we have seen this is my second year in the Loveland High School. We've seen a big change in what happened from last year to this year. Matter of fact, last year we hit about 68 offenses for electronic cigarettes for the vaping. This year it's changed. I know we're a little bit into the school year, but we've seen only about 5 so far. So yeah, the year will still tell us what we have to see. We are seeing all different types of vapes in the school. There's different brands and sizes and colors that the kids like to have. The flavors, of course, are another thing that draws them into it. So we are seeing that. And then when the kids become addicted, we see them different methods of trying to use the vapes, trying to sneak it, whether it be in the bathroom or somewhere else, in a classroom or a hidden space throughout the school. So we have been dealing with that.
Thank you. All right, this question is for both Jessica and Jesse. What happens when a student is caught with or using an e-cigarette?
Yeah, we have progressive discipline on that that's dealt with by the school. Our assistant principal, Matt Buis, is the one that deals with the discipline. We have the first offense if you're caught. It's a 1-day out of school suspension, and they have to participate in the ATOD program. The ATOD program is an alcohol, tobacco, and other drug program. It's a prevention educational program that they must participate in. It's a 5-week program that they participate 1 day a week in. And then it goes up through that. If second offense, it's a 3-day out of school suspension. And then it progressively gets more along the way. With all the way up, they could have a recommendation for expulsion from the schools.
And then on my end, since I work outside the school system, of course, I work with different schools, school systems and school districts to promote tobacco-free campuses. So one of the things I do is I will work with school districts and school administrators to develop or implement or basically strengthen their currently existing tobacco use and drug use policies within their school system. So what we try and do is we meet with them and determine what their policies currently look like, and then how tobacco-free the entire school district actually is. So we want to make sure that there is no use of any tobacco product on the entire school grounds, so that's any field or any office or any vehicle owned by the school system. And then we also make sure that it's during school hours as well as after school hours, as well as during any event, whether it is home or away. So we want to make sure it's, definitely at all times 24/7, whether the vehicle is here on school property or is traveling across country or traveling across state. We want to make sure that both when it comes to the students as well as the people who are employed there do not use any tobacco products while actually on the campus property or, like I said, in any of the vehicles as well. We just really want to make sure that the kids aren't seeing people that they may deem as role models or maybe that they want to be like when they grow up. We don't want them to see these people using these products. So we want to make sure it's definitely kept out of their eyes so they don't think that it's something normal and socially acceptable necessarily, and that it's a good path to take for them. So we just try and really make sure that the schools are aware of this. And then we also touch base on a lot of the disciplinary action behind it. So we do try and make sure that the disciplinary action is incorporated into the different policies. And we just kind of, we work with school districts and we kind of mention and we talk about different policies that have worked in other areas, other locations, also within the same state or sometimes the same county. And we look at different implementations because a lot of times when these kids are getting caught, yes, it may be their first offense. They may have just been trying it because a friend asked them. But a lot of times these kids are actually addicted to these products. So, there needs to be different routes to take, sometimes depending on the actual situation behind the individual who gets caught using these products in school or on school property.
Officer Moore, what would you say is being done to make sure students know about nicotine in e-cigarettes or vapes?
Yeah, to kind of hit on what from last year and this year, the change was last year with all those offenses that we had seen, there was a policy change. Last year was just a Saturday suspension. So again, the change that we had, the first offense is an out-of-school suspension in the ATOD program. We do talk about the brain of adolescence and how it affects it. So we are trying to promote the negativity for the nicotine products. The FDA's kind of come out with some flyers that we have or posters that we posted around the bathrooms. They're pretty unique and pretty special if you get a chance to look at them around there. I think it kind of hits home with a lot of the students that we have. But, right away when they have an offense, the parents are called. And they're notified of it right away. They must come pick up the student. The student is out of the school right away. So, that is a major thing that's going on that we have. We're aware that they're doing different things. I investigate all the time, and I'm learning about new things. There's actually smart watches that look like smart watches. They're actually vapes, hoodies that they have out there now. So we're paying attention to the trends, with what's going on. So we are on top of things. We're looking. We have a lot of students that come to us and let us know what's going on. They're getting better hiding spots if they have them.
I heard that you mentioned prevention education. Lauren, is prevention important in cases like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that most people start using nicotine before the age of 18, especially with e-cigarettes. Like we've seen, they're in a lot of the high schools and middle schools. So it's important to give kids accurate information to be able to make informed decisions about their health from an early time. Yeah.
How are these prevention education lessons provided to the students?
One thing that we've seen is really effective is peer-to-peer education. So they're more likely to listen to people their age instead of an authority figure. And we keep in mind what the evidence has shown to be effective and try to incorporate that into any trainings we have. So staying away from scare tactics and encouraging schools to do so is also important for that.
Yes, so what she said is definitely important. Staying away from scare tactics is a big thing nowadays. It's just been scientifically proven. The evidence is not there behind scare tactics. Kids tend to shut down basically if you just try and scare something out of them. So it doesn't really work. So what we want to make sure is, and one thing that I do go around to different school districts and different health education classes and provide tobacco prevention and just basically e-cigarette or vaping education lessons. And one of the things I always tell the kids before I leave, and I want to make sure that they know is the key thing that they take away from these lessons is that you will never hear me say I am pro-tobacco or anti-tobacco. I am pro-informed decision-making. So in the end, the only person who makes the decision for you is you. So you have to make sure that you have all the questions answered, you seek out all the information you need, you understand everything to the best of your ability, and then in the end, when that person or that friend or that stranger offers you that device or that cigarette or that little cigar, the Swisher Sweet or something, no matter what the flavor is, you have to decide whether or not you want to chance it and pick up that device or that product and try it and potentially become addicted. So, if you go out there and you know what the effects are of these and you know what the effects are of addiction and the effects of our nicotine and how quickly you can become addicted even from just one or two, tries or puffs off of an e-cigarette or a regular cigarette, if you know that, then in the end you have to decide what's best for you. Do you really want a chance, trying that watermelon flavored thing in the event that you're going to now have, a $20 a day potentially habit coming out of it? Or just the effects that can have on your health and your health care and in your future ability for jobs and things like that as well.
All right. Lauren, what would you say the goal of these lessons are?
I would say the goal of these is just to provide accurate information, address some of the common misconceptions, and provide everyone with correct information about the products, what's in them, the effects it can have on the body, and just help them become aware of that. Another thing we focus on is the marketing and how it does intentionally target teenagers, and just helping them be more aware of the marketing strategies that are used to target them. Overall, we just want to provide them with the knowledge and skills to be able to make informed decisions about their health, and that's something that can span across all drugs, so we want it to be sustainable in that way.
And then also just to add to that, like she had mentioned about the marketing and everything, we really want to get out there that people understand that these companies that market these items, they may have watermelon and fruit flavored and things like that, but the evidence behind that shows that those target kids. They target your youth, they target your adolescents, they target your young adults. So these are the ones that we really want to make sure that they have that all information because like Dr. Fegan said earlier, the brain is not fully developed until around the age of 25. And, until then you're a little bit more of a risk taker, you don't quite have as many inhibitions. So you really want to make sure that these are the ones that are getting this information. And usually when you mention to kids, anything about money or being targeted by these companies, that they are the ones they want to get hooked, because studies show that if you get hooked on one of these tobacco products when you're early on, you are going to get addicted and you will stay using a tobacco product, either an e-cigarette or progress onto traditional tobacco cigarettes for many years to come. It is a very hard substance to kick. So if you end up, getting addicted early on, like these companies want, and they're targeting you to get, they know they will have their money coming back into their pocket. So the main thing is just to get the information out there to make sure that they realize they're targeted. It's all about money for these companies. They want to make sure they continue to have that money in their pocket and those paychecks in their bank.
Is there anything else that any of you would say community members can do to help in preventing nicotine addiction?
Mike. One of the big things is the parents talking to their kids. Simple thing to do. May not be easy for everyone, but it makes sense. That's where you start. There are nicotine kits out there where you can test your kids as well. Look for these items. Look for these electronic cigarettes. Look for these vapes. Look in their backpacks, their cars, their rooms. These are things you want to be aware of. You need to know what's going on with your kids.
Just to add to that, an easy thing you can do is just be disapproving of any kind of nicotine use. It's shown that even if you use yourself, if you're disapproving, there's a lesser likelihood that they'll try it. And like he said, just be informed, have the correct information, and provide that to your kids. Have those conversations. Other things you can do are to advocate for tobacco-free policies in your schools and parks. A lot of policies don't have e-cigarettes included in the language, so they're still allowed to be used in public places. You could also advocate for your local school district to take the student survey offered by Prevention First. It helps us recognize what's happening in youth in specific communities and is very informational on what we should focus on in our prevention work.
Yeah, so just to kind of touch base on everything they've really said, the main thing, of course, is always having that conversation with your kids. It may be uncomfortable, it may be something that you're not wanting to do right away, but in the end, it's better to have that uncomfortable situation once than to have to deal with an addiction for many years to come. Having that conversation, getting the information out there, making sure that it's coming from a reputable source. So a lot of times the CDC or the Centers for Disease Control or Disease Prevention and Control will have amazing information out there. The Federal Drug Administration or FDA will have amazing information out there. There's the Truth Initiative. There's the Catch My Breath program. There's a lot of these resources out there that are available most of the time free to use for these people, for any adults or you want parents, guardians, whoever it may be. This information is out there for free for you all to use, and it is scientific based, it's evidence backed, and it's just a reputable source of information. And then just to kind of touch base on what Lauren said, these policies really go a long way. So policies help to ensure that there's sustainability behind change. So, while you may have an administration or a council that says, oh yes, let's definitely make this, this park smoke free. Unless it's written down, the moment that administration changes, it's very likely that policy will never go on unless it's a policy that's been put in place. So we like to make sure that policies are written down, that they're actually signed in, or there's a resolution made for the school, some form of permanent movement for getting these places tobacco-free or smoke-free. A lot of times there are parks that have playgrounds. And a lot of times kids attend those playgrounds, and kids have parents that come with them, of course. So if you have kids that are playing on this playground and you have a lot of parents or adults around them that are smoking, they're going to see this every time they go to this playgrounds. So they're going to think that it's normal. Oh, well, when I'm an adult, I can smoke. It's fine. Everybody does it. Well, and really, it's not. So we want to kind of keep that out of the eyes and out of the viewpoint of these kids that are growing up in these areas all the time, and just kind of make sure that they understand that we want you to experience life to your fullest extent. We want you to have all this information, but we maybe don't want you to pick up that tobacco product. So definitely get out there and have that conversation. And then also we work with, on policy side, we do work with businesses and organizations. Like Lauren said, e-cigarettes are not incorporated in almost any actual policy for businesses and organizations unless they implement it themselves. It is not a statewide policy at this point. So you do have the smoke-free workplace ban, which does follow with traditional tobacco products like cigarettes and cigars and things like that, but it does not incorporate e-cigarettes. So what we're working towards is getting individual businesses and things like that, as well as schools, when I work with them on policies, to incorporate all e-cigarettes as well, and all devices that can be used to use one of these products or one of the e-juices or something like that as well. And then in the end, I'm sure many people have already heard, but Ohio recently signed into law on October 17th the Tobacco 21, which is something that made it to where everybody to purchase, in order to purchase any tobacco-related products, so that is e-cigarettes, vapes, you have the e-juice or the e-liquid that you want to call it, Swisher Sweets, you name it, you have to be now 21 years of age or older to buy. So what that does is it gets it out of the high schools. You don't have, high school seniors buying it for high school freshmen anymore. So that's a great approach for the state of Ohio that they finally took. So it's an awesome thing to get that signed into law. So now it cannot be overlooked when, a new administration or something comes in. So that's an amazing thing that the state of Ohio just did as well.
Awesome.
We totally support the Tobacco 21 and think it's a great idea. But whenever there's a law like that, there's the possibility of getting your vape from somewhere else and getting it from a source that's even worse than the store. And so when we're talking about vaping and talking about young people, this stuff is really bad. You don't know what you're sucking in. You don't know what you're heating up and sucking in. It could be anything in there. And you talk about cigarettes can kill you a long time from now. It's hard to communicate that danger to a young person. Vaping can cause permanent lung damage right now. I know 2 people who have that. And so that's important to get in people's minds, is that this can cause immediate permanent lung damage that's going to be with you forever. So you need to think twice about what you're sucking in on these things.
Yes, and just to follow up with that, there was recently a case where a gentleman who had been using his vape for not a long period of time was 17 years old, and he was the first patient to now have to be undergo a double lung transplant. So like he said, this damage is irreversible. It is permanent, and it can have lasting permanent effects. There are numerous kids out there right now. The average age of somebody getting this lung disease is 24 years old. So if there are over 2,000 cases of this lung disease out there right now due to these vaping products, and they're not still quite sure what the chemical is confirmed just yet. But if the average age is 24 and there's over 2,000 cases, that means the majority of these people that are affected are very young. Last time I checked, I believe 79% are under the age of 35. So if you have that large percentage of people that are being affected, you know that this is definitely geared towards and marketed towards youth or young adults. That's one thing that we definitely want to make sure to realize, that these effects are very, very frequently becoming very, very fast to be seen right after starting use.
All right, so a lot has been discussed today, from nicotine addiction to e-cigarettes, education, and policies. But we want to make sure that any remaining questions you may have are answered during the live question and answer session with our panelists. But before moving to the question and answer session, I would like to let you know that this is an opportunity for any community members to tell their tobacco-related stories. If you have a story about tobacco or e-cigarette use that's affected you or a loved one, please visit the link that is up on our slide and share your story with the Hamilton County Public Health. So at this time, we will open the forum for a live Q&A session with all the attendees. If you're attending this forum via Facebook, we ask that you submit your questions via the link on the slide, and using the code, which is 555-5880.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if anybody has any questions or anything they would like to put in, you can, so it stays a little bit anonymous, and you don't have to worry about it. If your parents are sitting next to you, it's not a big deal. You can send it in via any type of smartphone or computer or anything like that, and all you have to do is go to minty.com, and it'll ask you for a code. And the code that you type in is 555880. And if you do have a question, you can go ahead and submit it now, or you can always, we'll leave this open for a little bit after the actual discussion if there are any questions. I know a lot of the topics we kind of covered today, but if there are any questions, you can go ahead and submit them, and then we'll see if anybody here in the audience has any questions. A lot of times when I do certain types of community events, there's a lot of questions that maybe aren't answered. So if anybody has any questions here in the audience, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll see if we can go ahead and get them answered by somebody. Does anybody have any questions currently? You can go ahead and grab one of the mics.
I was just curious, what initiatives are available for students and parents to get involved in the Loveland community to help with this coalition?
Okay, so in Loveland community in particular, there is a few different avenues that you can do to get involved, especially when it comes to e-cigarettes and vaping and things like that. So first and foremost, advocate for policy change. So you can get out there into your school district and just into your community in general to advocate for those tobacco-free policies. So tobacco-free school district for Loveland School District. You can advocate for tobacco-free parks. You can advocate for tobacco-free businesses. So you can advocate individually owned businesses to actually incorporate not only the smoke place ban that is by Ohio state law, but you can also incorporate vaping and e-cigarettes into those policies. So that's something you can definitely advocate for. And then there is, of course, coalitions within the community as well. So LEAD, or Loveland Educating Against Drugs, or Alcohol and Drugs, is a very good coalition to become a part of. So they kind of help and they provide this information. They're one of the people who are helped put on this event today. So they're very involved within the Loveland community, specifically for Loveland. And then also there's many schools out there in school districts that have student-led youth groups. So you can get involved with one of your student-led youth groups. So there are ones with like Students Against Destructive Decisions. There's ones like some school districts across the state actually have what's called stand groups. So those are the students that get together and they stand against tobacco use. So there's a few different avenues. The best thing that if you're not in specifically Loveland in this area, the best thing is just to kind of contact your school district, contact your school administration, and ask them what's available for students. Because a lot of times these kids that are becoming addicted to these things, they don't know who to turn to. And a lot of times they feel more comfortable turning to somebody who's their own age. You know, maybe a little bit older, a little bit, you know, around their same age, but they feel more comfortable that way. You know, maybe a student guidance counselor works, and then other cases they just kind of want somebody who's almost like a friend to them. So I know a lot of times, like we had talked about previously, peer-to-peer education. I know going into schools right now, I have used students that were slightly older than high schoolers. So they have helped me out quite a bit. So those were the students, they went into high schools and they went into middle schools with me, and they provided the education. And that really helped the kids, even the younger kids, open up more than I think I would have seen if it was the teacher teaching it or myself teaching it. And that really, really helps. So basically just getting out there, seeing what's available in your school district, no matter which school district you're in, and advocating for policy change is a really big deal in your community as well as just your district as a whole. Thank you. Are there any other questions out there? Yes. You can come on up and take a mic.
So a lot of times I hear people say that they know it's bad for themselves, but they don't care because of the feeling that they have. What would you suggest that I would say to them?
So that's a bit of a different issue, because if they're already saying that, they're most likely already addicted. So at that point, you get some people that may become a little bit defensive. So they know it's bad for them. I have close friends that used to, you know, people would tell them, oh, smoking's bad for you. Oh, I know, I gotta die sometime though. So it's a very, very common thing. So you just kind of want to ask them, you know, even if they have the information, a lot of people who smoke know what's bad for them. So sometimes education isn't the way to go. So you maybe want to tell them, you know, like, well, how much money? So particularly for young kids, you may not have, you know, a full-time job. You may not be having, you know, a nice weekly paycheck or something coming in. So a lot of times when it comes to other adolescents and kids, it's nice to mention, you know, how much money are you spending on that? You know, or maybe you can't sit through an entire movie now. So, you know, like imagine how much more you could do if you weren't addicted to that product. So, you know, instead of going out every 5 minutes and smoking a cigarette, you could actually sit through an entire movie with your friends. You could go bowling. You could hang out at a restaurant without having to worry about going outside or something like that. So a lot of times just kind of finding out what's important to them and then helping them to see how using that tobacco product is actually affecting them. And then just trying to see, you know, and then always just being supportive of them. You know, they're only going to quit when they're ready to quit. So if they're not ready to quit at that point, just kind of supporting them, and you know, when they are ready, being there for them, being that supportive friend or that supportive, you know, parent, caregiver, whichever you may be, being that supportive person behind them is a really, really big deal for most people.
And I also have another question. So you talked about how people were getting sick from it, and I've heard people say, oh, it's just because they're laced with something. I get it clean, I know it because this person, it's never happened to me, so I'm fine. So what would I say to that?
Dr. Fegans, you want to take this one?
Yes, I know this stuff is clean. So the vapes or the e-cigarettes that you buy, have to have some, even if they're just nicotine or even if they're just flavored, they have some kind of liquid propellant, usually propylene glycol. And many of the early case studies of vaping-associated lung injury were associated with that, heating up propylene glycol. The stuff that appears to be related to the lung injury, or this what's called bronchiolitis obliterans, you may hear about is THC. It's frequently THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the marijuana, the psychoactive component of marijuana that are in many of these vapes. Things you buy, you never quite know what's in it, especially if you get it off the street. Much of the THC, they have to put something in it to make it more liquefied. And so what they found is this vitamin E acetate. 29 samples from people who had severe lung injury, 29 samples, all 29 had this vitamin E acetate. If you look at the little tocopherol, little vitamin E capsules, that's what that is, that liquid stuff. And so you never know what's in there. There was something called diacetyl, which is the popcorn sort of flavor that can cause lung failure. They call it popcorn lung. And that's been now banned. And so we don't even know what we don't know in terms of what's in these things. If you heat something up to a vapor, especially the thicker it is, like that vitamin E acetate, and you breathe it in, it causes an inflammatory reaction in your lungs, even more so than smoking in cigarettes. And that inflammatory reaction stays with you. And you got to be aware of that. The other question is, how do you get off of that? And nicotine replacement therapy and other things that we can help with to help you get off of that in the right way.
Yes, and then just to kind of back up on that as well, these chemicals that are being added to these things, they are, when you eat them, when you drink them, when you have in your gum, your candy, they are FDA approved. So all of these flavors have chemical names. So you have vanilla, you have cinnamon, you have buttered popcorn. All of these things, the creamy flavor from a buttered popcorn comes from chemicals. So like he said, diacetyl. Diacetyl is the thing that gives these vapes and these e-cigarettes or the e-liquids the creaminess. So if you have creamy butter, if you have creamy vanilla, something like that, that is a chemical giving it that creamy flavor. And that chemical in particular, like he said, is the one that is linked to what's now referred to as popcorn lung. And then you have vanilla and all these other flavors that can be added to give it this flavor, but then they do have chemical side effects, and they're not FDA approved to be inhaled. So while you may eat it, drink it, what have you, but the moment you start inhaling it, it's no longer FDA approved. Therefore, the side effects are not known. And as he mentioned, the vaping has not been around long enough to have long-term side effects. I mean, it took hundreds and thousands of years to find out the full side effects of tobacco use. So, back in the day, it used to be promoted by doctors. Nowadays, we know that it is not a good thing. But that was basically a population study. Those effects were mainly found out because we had tons of people using them. And as of right now, we don't have that hundreds and thousands of years of use behind vapes or e-cigarettes of that sort. They've only been in the U.S. since about 2007. So it's not enough time to find out the full effects of inhaling all these different chemicals and inhaling all these different flavors in general. So even though he may think that it's clean and he may know this and, there's nothing laced in it, while it may not be laced with something that was, in addition, it may actually just have chemicals in there to begin with that are bad.
Thank you.
I just want to mention one thing. So there are 7 FDA-approved replacement therapies to help folks quit smoking. 5 nicotine replacement therapies and 2 medicines, Zyban and Chantix. E-cigarettes is not one of those. E-cigarettes is not FDA-approved, nor is it recommended for smoking cessation. But the biggest reason, well, 2 reasons. One is that it's very dangerous. The second is that people don't stop e-cigarettes. What they found is they transition from one to the other. And many people use both, smoke regular cigarettes and also e-cigarettes, and have double toxicity. And so e-cigarettes, even though there may be some European literature and recommendations from the past, are not recommended for smoking cessation. The best way to stop smoking is to stop suddenly, cold turkey.
Are there any other questions in the audience? Okay, it looks like we'll go ahead and move to the questions that are have been given via the website here. There we go.
All right, question number 1. Are there any informative sessions for the students to be able to get this information in the schools?
I can go ahead and take this one real quick. So right now, I myself, on behalf of Hamilton County Public Health, I do get into I'm in 4 school districts and in 5 different schools right now, and I work with health education teachers to provide education to the students directly. So what that entails is I actually get into the schools, and sometimes I actually use med students, and they will actually provide the peer-to-peer education to those kids. So we make sure they have, very evidence-based, very scientific information to, bust those myths and make sure they have their questions answered. And then we also make sure, I also make sure to train the teachers. So that sustainability factor, again, is very important. So we train the teachers to make sure they know the information, they have the avenues to gain more information and more training, and then they know how to deliver the information to the kids in a way they're going to respond well to it. So we do work with that. A lot of times, I know in the future, we will be reaching out to for professional development days within school districts to provide this training to all teachers within the actual school district. So that's something we're hoping to do in the near future. And then just making sure that everybody has the information itself within the school system, that's important. So understanding the disciplinary action behind it, understanding the policies behind it on the administrative level, understand the education that's important, and just what kids respond well to. Adolescents and youth respond well to being targeted and the amount of money it's going to cost them when they become addicted. They don't respond well to scare tactics, as we've mentioned a couple of times here. So we try and stay away from that when it comes to information sessions within the school. And then I don't know if Lauren has anything to add from what they do on behalf of Prevention First.
Okay, so one of my projects right now is developing something like this. So I need to get more input from high schoolers to be able to develop it. I want to know what they want to know. So it's still in the beginning stages, but it's hoped to be a peer-to-peer training. So I would train high schoolers to give it to middle schoolers, and hopefully give that a couple times a year or a couple times a semester, because we know a one-and-done informative session is not it's not effective. So we're hoping to pilot that soon.
All right, this question comes from a middle school health teacher. I commonly hear kids say that vaping isn't bad because you can control the amount of nicotine. How would you respond to this statement?
I guess I can go ahead and take this. So I have heard this commonly from a lot of the kids I've taught, as well as parents who have heard it from their kids, friends who have heard it from friends, and whoever it may be. So yes, while there is the ability, depending on the device that you're using, to control the nicotine, and there is one thing that you have to keep in mind is these products are not FDA regulated. So when it comes to e-juices in particular, they're not FDA regulated. Therefore, they may or may not be accurate in what they're representing on the actual label. So there have been studies done on device or on actual e-liquids that say they are nicotine free, but the studies have found that they have actual nicotine in it, and vice versa. They say that they have nicotine in it when they're actually found to have nicotine free, and it's all over the board. And then there are some devices where you can regulate, or you just basically buy a juice that says it has lower nicotine or higher nicotine and what have you. So you can do that. However, when it comes to kids, if they're the ones saying this, you have to remember any amount of nicotine whatsoever for an adolescent brain is not deemed good. So it does have permanent effects. It can permanently alter your brain chemistry. And so basically, if your brain's not fully developed, and you put in this addictive substance in it, it can alter those pathways and those synapses that you need in order to be, as normal as you would have been had you not had that addictive substance put into your system at that time. So that's one thing we definitely want to make sure that, even after this event, kids understand that any amount of nicotine for a developing brain, so that's up until about the age of 25, is not something good to have in your system. So while they may be saying, oh, it's fine, I can control the amount of nicotine, nicotine's highly addictive. Even at small amounts, you can become addicted. Even after one puff, you can become addicted. And then if you're under the age of 25, your brain now needs that even more, and it's going to be permanently altered from the way it would have been had you never had that substance. And I don't know if Dr. Fegans has anything to add.
These typical Juuls, you can easily suck in about 200 puffs, or about 300 puffs. 200 is about one module. 300 puffs, that's a pack and a half a day of habit that you've got, and you didn't even realize it. You could do that with some bathroom breaks if Officer Moore doesn't find you. And so coming off of that is significant. Imagine coming off a pack and a half a day of cigarette tolerance addiction, and it's so easy to do. And so yes, you think you can control it. It's like you think you can stop eating donuts. It's hard.
how does vaping and nicotine affect the culture of the school?
Okay, I can go ahead and take this one as well. Just from my experience being in the schools, I've probably, I don't know, provided lessons to well over 1,000 students, especially this semester. A few, maybe less, maybe around 600 or 700 this year, this school year, anyways. So vaping and nicotine really affect the culture. Unfortunately, it's in a negative way, simply because it's an addictive substance. But a lot of times, it's something that kids are nowadays seeing all the time on their social media feeds. So whether you have Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you watch YouTube videos, whatever you do, you're going to see these advertisements a lot. So this is something that, you won't see Camel, Marlboro, and Newport advertised on these same platforms. You won't see a billboard from them. You won't see this at all. However, these platforms that these kids are on all the time, they have them all the time. So you see advertisements for these. You see, social media tweets. You see things like that. But then in addition to the actual advertisements, you have people who are famous and people they maybe look up to or as role models using these products and promoting them just by, posting a picture with you puffing on a jewel, and saying, ooh, mango flavored. Well, now you just had, maybe an 11, 12, or 13-year-old see that. They wanted to grow up to be a movie star like you. Well, now they think that it's okay if they use that product because it'll help them become a movie star. This is how minds of children work. They're different. So they see that and they're influenced very easily. So they influence, by seeing these things on social media all the time. They think it's around. Recently, when I was in schools, I would ask kids, what percentage of, when I was in high school, I was asking what percentage of high schoolers are currently using these products. I had all types of percentages. I had 50, 80, I had 99, 100%. Well, in all actuality, in 2018, the total amount is only 20.9%. And that's not from 2018, or from 2019, but if 20.9% are currently using it, but all of the kids, when you ask them, are telling you 80 to 90%, you gotta start to think, why is that? And after, some reading, some research, and asking the kids, it's because they see it all the time. So they think that it's everywhere. They think that the kids are using it because they see it there, and they think all the famous people are using it. So it's something that they see all the time, so it really just becomes something that, it's almost like a norm, a social norm. And that's one of the things we're really trying to get away from is making kids or helping kids understand that it's not a social norm. Getting away from that is an okay thing to do because you see famous people doing it all the time in your social media feed. So we're just trying to get that education out there and making sure they realize, you shouldn't be creating a culture around something that's an addictive substance that could potentially harm you if not kill you. Yeah, Officer Moore, do you have any input with that since you see it from the other aspect?
It's not unique just to Loveland High School. This is going on throughout the United States, and it's not a particular area where it's happening. It's happening all over. It's absolutely a negative thing for the culture of any school and for the culture of the United States. This is a problem that we have, and this is why we're up here to try to solve this problem and try to help with the negativity that's going on. It's not glamorous. It's not healthy. And it's costly. There's many, many factors why this shouldn't be going on. So yeah, it is a negative thing that we're dealing with in school. That's why we work very hard to keep these out of our school.
And then just to add to that, kind of what he said, it's cross-racial, it's cross-ethnicity, it's cross-cultural, it's cross-social, it's cross-social boundaries, basically. There are kids, your black communities, white communities, immigrant communities, Asian communities, all of these kids are being affected almost the same when it comes to e-cigarettes in general. So while tobacco is it does affect different cultures and different races and ethnicities different, e-cigarettes have been found that it's affecting a lot of them the same, no matter where you come from. So it is an extremely dangerous thing going on right now across, like you said, the entire U.S. is dealing with it. You have states that virtually had zero population, or very, very low population of teens or adolescents using tobacco products. They have some of the highest rates of people using e-cigarettes and vapes. So that's something to really make sure. So most of the work that has been done in the previous years by public health to decrease the number of adolescents that are using tobacco products has been virtually wiped away by the introduction of e-cigarettes. So most of, this dramatic decline has now come back up. So where we were at, around 8 or 13% of adolescents using, we're now back up at the 20.9 of just high schoolers.
There's always something. So I grew up in Tennessee. About half of my high school, at the end of the day, went home and worked tobacco farms. We didn't think anything about it. There was actually a smoking area at the school. Then we moved on to other things. Today, one thing we can't ignore is about 30% of our student surveys consistently point to marijuana use. Part of this culture also causes you to have a lower threshold of fear of other things, marijuana being one of those things. And as we as a state make medical marijuana legal, it adds a little bit of credibility to that. And so it's something else that we also have to consider. And so the vaping thing associated with THC and vaping is even more of a concern.
How should students approach their friends about vaping and encouraging them to quit?
I know when the young gentleman stood up before, we kind of talked a little bit about this. It's basically just being there as a support system for that child or that friend. So if these are students, they're most likely younger. So they already have that, higher risk of becoming addicted very easily. They already have that, lower inhibitions. So they're more risk takers. And maybe they don't fully understand the risk of becoming addicted or the fact that these companies are just out to target them. So basically, in the end, these companies don't want you to, try healthy things. They want you to become addicted so they can make money. And just making sure that they know that. But a lot of the kids, if they are vaping on a regular basis, that means they're addicted. So it's maybe getting them those resources. I know right now we like to get out there that the My Life, My Quit program, which is put on by the National Jewish Health Systems. So that program is something that was created by teens for teens to help them with quitting tobacco use. It is mainly geared towards e-cigarettes, but it goes for any teen that is currently addicted to tobacco products. So the My Life, My Quit program is a program that can be completed completely via text if you want. It can be completed via online chat as well as by phone if you wish. It's free, confidential, and it does not need any type of parent permission or parental permission. And it really helps to guide the kids in their best direction of quitting. It's very inspirational. And at the very end, if you go through the entire program, you actually get a certification that you completed the program. So a lot of times giving that kid something to look forward to, that, if they know they quit, not only will they be healthier, they'll have more money, but they'll have that concrete thing saying, I went through this program, I did it, I achieved something, and they can keep that for themselves. So getting those resources and that information out there to the kids and to your friends who maybe are looking to quit or maybe want some more information about it, they're not quite sure, getting that out there and making sure they have it is very important. And then just making sure also that you're there to support them whenever they need it. So if they need a friend, to sit there with them because they're going, they're maybe having mood swings now, or they're withdrawing from nicotine, or they really, really want to hit that jewel because they're having an exam this week, just being with them and saying, no, there's better things to do. Let's listen to some music. Let's go out to dinner. Let's go watch a movie. Let's find something new to do. Go kayaking or hiking or something. Just being that, that emotional support person for your friends.
What type of cessation efforts are available for the students at the school?
I can go ahead and take this one again, I guess. So cessation efforts is very difficult for students. So most students are under the age of 18, which is the age that most traditional anyways nicotine replacement therapies are qualified to be given. So normally for most physicians, you would have to be 18 years of age or older to receive any of the normal nicotine replacement therapies. As Dr. Figgins mentioned earlier, there's 7 approved that we highly recommend for adults if they're attempting to quit tobacco use. Those 7 the 5 nicotine replacement and the 2 prescriptions are highly recommended for adults. However, there are some contraindications for somebody who's under the age of 18. So up to that point, right now, it's just kind of understanding. And there is no evidence actually that those work for people who are under the age of 18. However, for that, we always recommend that you visit your family physician, of course, and seek medical advice if you have any questions about that. But for schools, cessation efforts is basically providing the students with that same information. So while you may be providing it with your friends, if you're a teacher or if you're in a school administration or you're just in a school district, or maybe you're a parent and you really want to make sure your kids get this information, contacting your schools and making sure they're giving this information. So cessation in particular is not very much, or there's not many very many options for kids, unfortunately. So the My Life, My Quit, we definitely promote, just simply because it's one of the only ones out there for kids for cessation. So they help guide them through the entire process, tell them alternatives, for when they're stressed out or something, and then just making sure that if you are in that school district or you have that child or somebody, you just get that information to them in particular.
So treatment of nicotine withdrawal in adolescents is a huge area of research right now. And the best we know is that nicotine replacement therapy, and you can use that off-label. The way you do that is basal bolus. You put on the patch, so you've got it on at bedtime, and you wake up with nicotine in your system and use the bolus. You can use the gum, which is very hard to use. It's actually chew and pack, chew and pack. It's very difficult. It's almost impossible to use, and so we recommend the mini lozenge, which I think is pretty shortly going to be recommended down to age 15. There are two medicines. One of them is bupropion or Zyban, which is really not useful in adolescents at all. And a recently large study of Chantix or varenicline, which theoretically ought to work very well because it's a nicotine antagonist. It was a drug that was created for nicotine replacement therapy to supplement. It is a 3 times likelihood for adults in stopping smoking when they take Chantix or varenicline. A recent study in adolescents, which we had great hopes for, showed that it did not seem to help as much as nicotine replacement therapy. And so today, the best that we have is to simply replace one with another. And we try not to go above the 14 milligram patch. The one key thing about the patch is that it can cause really weird dreams in 20%. I had a young man who was coming off methamphetamine who said, "Awesome, that's what I want." May not be the best thing, but just know that for the first 3 or 4 nights you can have some unusual dreams when you're on the nicotine patch. But that's the best we know. We still treat, even though the FDA hasn't given us approval for that age group because it's better to do that. There's a lot of research. I think there may very well be some new nicotine replacement therapy specifically directed toward the adolescent population. I mean 15 to 18 age group.
Most times kids share vapes. Do the kids who bring in vapes get a harsher punishment than the ones who share?
Jessica, this is not you. This is going to be me, okay? Possession or use is the same offense. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. First offense is the same. So it's treated the same. Doesn't matter whether it's yours or not.
How do you suggest a parent inform their kids' friends about the dangers? Should the parent contact the parents, or should they let the friend of the child know?
I guess I will take this one again. So my experience comes with working with kids. They're not going to tell their friends' parents anything. So if you tell them, oh, you should tell your friend, you should tell your parents that your friend is using this, they're not going to tell them. If you have 2 13-year-olds hanging out and you tell one 13-year-old to go tell their parents something, they're most likely never going to tell it. Has anyone ever had any issues with somebody returning a permission slip before it was due or on time? And you give a kid something to go tell their parents or tell someone else's parents, more often than not, it's not going to happen. And sometimes it just might feel awkward. So, if you tell a child to go tell their parents that, hey, your friend's using vapes or something like that, it's going to be very difficult to find out for sure that they're actually telling their parents that. And more often than not, they're just going to feel uncomfortable and they just won't do it. So I would think that the best thing to do is definitely to maybe contact the parent and also tell the student. So make sure you tell the kid and be like, hey, maybe they're not actually using it right now, and you maybe just want to make sure that the parents have the information. You could just kind of say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I just found out something new today. And share the information that way. Make it very, very, comfortable setting. Make it very, by the fact and very open conversation. And you don't have to specify right now if you maybe found out because your kid is using it or because they have a friend who are using these devices. You don't have to specify that. Just be like, hey, did you know it's, you should be talking to your kid about these topics, and maybe these are somehow some ways that you can find out whether or not your kid is addicted or find out whether or not your kid is using these. Just kind of share it as a very matter-of-factly way, and making sure just basically that they have the information, and then if they have any questions, just to be like, oh yeah, there's this website out there, or the CDC has this information out there, or oh, if you come by, a youth that is using these products, the My Life, My Quit program would help them out quite a bit. Just kind of making sure they have that information out there. But I would definitely say contacting the parents is most important, just so they got the information, but then also telling the child as well, because they also in the end need the information as well.
So that's different in the healthcare community. So when you are seeing your clinician, your physician, or your advanced practice clinician, you are the patient, and that's a trusted relationship. And so I hear a lot of things, and what we encourage is when we're ready, let's talk together to the parent. When you're ready to talk with your parent or your friend or your guardian about this, it may not be today, it may be a week or a month from now. Let us do that together, but we don't violate now. This is a different in the healthcare community. We don't violate that trust, that therapeutic alliance that develops between clinician and patient.
How do you know that students get the vapes since they? How do you know students get the vapes since they are under the age of 21?
Say, Elsamore, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. They buy them from others. There are students that we have found that sell them to others. You know, they make it a business, and we aim to stop that business. That's not going to be allowed. You know, they go to different states. They order them online. Like the doctor said, you don't know what's in this stuff. This is a mystery of what's going into them, you know, when you buy them. There's no regulations on these. So, yeah, they find their ways. It's like with anything else, you know, with the vapes. Once they become addicted, they need to have them. Some form, some type of it. So they're getting them from friends. They're getting them from mail orders. You can order them online. You can drive just across. We're close in the tri-state area here. Very easy to go to other states to pick these up, unfortunately, where they don't have the T21 like we have now in Ohio.
And then just referring to T21, if they were under the age of 21 when they purchased it, they may just still have the same device. So yes, you are not supposed to be using it, and you're not supposed to be buying anything now unless you're over the age of 21 or 21 years of age or older. However, if you were 18 at the time before it was enacted on October 17th and you already had the device, you may actually just still have it.
Yeah, I hear a lot of stuff. I wish that part of the creativity that goes into the use of our internet and the use of various things could be put towards schoolwork. But it's amazing. It's amazing. And I always want to ask, like, how in the world did you get this? And I can't. But at any rate, it's always curious.
What is law enforcement doing to enforce the new T21 laws in Ohio? What are the consequences for possession if you are under the age of 21?
So I can definitely take this one, at least for the most part anyways. So Tobacco 21 was just enacted on October 17th. The Ohio Department of Health is still currently kind of, making the final decisions when it comes to enforcement, but in the end, it's going to fall back on local, like city and community or municipality enforcement on behalf of the actual Tobacco 21 law. So what that means is, once it's all said and done, individual municipalities will be responsible for actually enforcing the laws. So that will be, if somebody complains that somebody bought something under the age of 21, that means it's going to be those officers in that municipality or that city that are responsible for responding to that if somebody says something. So right now, as on behalf of like Tobacco 21 or on behalf of Hamilton County Public Health, we do go out occasionally and we'll do compliance checks. So in addition to us doing them, we do have the Federal Drug Administration or the FDA that also completes them. And then some local municipalities have actually just opted to complete their own. In addition to what's actually being required. So they do those, and we go out and we will, you will use different adolescents. So since now the age is 21, we will use people who are usually 18, 19, or 20 years old, and basically just send them into a store to see if they're able to make these purchases. And they use their identification. There is no lying. It's all done by the books, and it's basically just to see if the person will sell to them. And if they do, then there are different stipulations depending on the organization that found them. And so it differs between local versus county versus federal. And then, of course, we just really want to make sure the education gets put out there. First of all, that they know T21 is a law now. So that is a major thing right now since it is very new. Somebody may not have gotten the information, or that clerk working may not know about it. And then also we just want to make sure they understand why that is such an important thing, and why it's difficult for adolescents to use these products, and then because they'll become addicted. And then the consequences of possession if you're under the age of 21. This is a little bit interesting. It kind of depends on where you're caught at, who catches you, and things like that. However, the actual Ohio Tobacco 21 law mainly states when you are actually purchasing the product. If you go in and you use your real ID and things like that, most of the liability falls back on the clerk or the store owner. So we really want to make sure that we're not trying to use scare tactics again for kids, and we want to make sure that the owners are the ones who understand that this is something that you should not be doing. You should not be profiting off of getting kids who are under the age of 21 addicted to these products. So while you may like your money and things like that, it is very likely that the first few times that you do it, or the first time that you do it, you will get a fine. And these fines do get heftier the more times you do it, and then eventually they actually can just revoke your ability to sell tobacco products entirely. So while you may have a convenience store, if half of your product is tobacco and you just had your ability to sell tobacco products revoked, then you may lose a dramatic amount of your income at that point. So we really want to make sure people understand that, in particular the stores and everything, that this is a law now, that you cannot sell to anybody under the age of 21. You need to identify, get their ID of anybody who is making the purchases, and make sure that the signs are up, and make sure everybody knows that you cannot do this, because in the end, you're risking your livelihood basically if you're going to continue to sell these products to people who are under the age of 21.
Another thing on that, it is illegal to possess under age 21. It is illegal if you're over 21 to purchase for someone that is under 21. All that's done right there, that's changed the age. That's been around, those laws have been around already for the age, in the past. They've just bumped the age up. It used to be 18. Now it's just changed. It's a misdemeanor, it's not a felony, but it is a problem.
We have a coalition called Loveland Educating Against Alcohol and Drugs. What can we do as a group of youth to help our friends make healthy choices?
Okay, so any coalition, including the Loveland Educating Against Alcohol and Drugs, are great coalitions to become a part of. So you have local community coalitions, maybe school coalitions, you even just have business groups and things like that, maybe at your work. There's employee wellness, there is employee groups at work, maybe that you're just, employee assistance program, things like that you can get a part of to make sure your coworkers and everybody understand the how to make these healthy choices. So for youth in particular, the best thing to do is just to make sure that you stay involved with your friends. So maybe understand what they're doing. If they're going through a rough time and you think that maybe they're going to pick up one of these devices or try them, or maybe they're making, friends with a crowd of people that are currently using these devices, just making sure that they have the education behind it before actually picking up the device and becoming potentially addicted to them. Just kind of making sure, you stay involved with them. If they're a good friend of yours, make sure they have the information. If you find out something interesting or that you didn't know, like maybe you didn't know that these devices were addictive, go back home tonight and you can make sure your friends know, hey, I just learned this, it's watermelon and they told me it was just water, but really these devices don't work if they're actually just water. So it's something that you really just want to make sure that your friends are just aware of their decisions that they make and the consequences that they can have in the end.
Do you think the term vaping contributes to the epidemic because users think it's vapor with no consequences?
So yeah, absolutely. Vaping, that kind of infers that it's water vapor, and it's actually an aerosol. So we're actually trying to change the language to refer to it as an aerosol instead of a vape or a vapor. But that's no accident that it was marketed that way. So that definitely interferes with the perception of harm.
Yeah, and then just to kind of follow up on that, many of the lessons I've taught in the schools nowadays, you'll hear them say like vapes, vape pens. One of the questions I always ask is, who can tell me the difference between an e-cigarette and a vape or a Juul? And more often than not, you will have different questions or different things said, like e-cigarettes have nicotine, vapes don't. E-cigarettes produce a smoke, vapes produce a water vapor. E-cigarettes don't have flavors, they just taste like tobacco. E-cigarettes are the one, vapes are the one that have like watermelon and cotton candy. Well, I followed that up with, well, actually, there is no difference between them. Back when they first came out, they were called e-cigarettes because they wanted people who actually smoked traditional tobacco cigarettes to switch to something that was, at the time, thought to be less harmful. So they wanted something that looked the same, that kind of smelled the same, that kind of gave them the same feeling, that gave them that hand-to-mouth thing for when somebody, such as an adult who was smoking a pack a day or something, were to quit. They wanted to give them something they could switch to. Well, nowadays, they weren't getting the market that they needed in order to maintain their manufacturing and whatnot, so they kind of rebranded it and they remarketed it. And then new companies came on, such as Juul, and that's when you start getting things that look like USB drives. So most of these kids that are picking up the things that are on there right now that are referred to commonly as vape pens or just Juuls in particular, these are kids that would have never picked up a traditional cigarette. They weren't in the environment. They didn't have it in their environment at home. They didn't see it at the parks, things like that. They didn't have a parent who smoked in the car with them all the time. These are kids who are just picking it up because it's something that looks cool right now. So when they hear the word vape and they hear the word vapor, like Lauren said, it goes back to water vapor. They think it's something that's harmless because water, water can't harm you. My body's made up of water mainly, and we drink water all the time. However, like she said, it's an aerosol. So those tiny particles that are within this aerosol are the ones that get stuck deep into your lungs, and those are the ones that can potentially be harmful, if not worse, when you're using these products.
Do the effects of vape...
That's okay. I think I caught it before it went on. So it was, do the effects of vapes or e-cigarettes get to your brain and your heart faster, if I'm not mistaken anyways? And Dr. Figgins, would you be able to give any comment on that? Whether or not the nicotine in like e-cigarettes actually gets to your brain or your heart faster than a traditional cigarette?
It does, yeah, it does. And because you're breathing it in, it's actually the submucosal level that gets into the bloodstream that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And so roughly the similar, but probably about the same. But they certainly can do more harm. There's a serious vasoconstriction that occurs when you inhale nicotine that can, in fact, cause a heart attack.
Yeah, and then just to kind of add to that, people need to keep in mind that while you may have one pod for this one cigarette, like Dr. Figgins said earlier, one pod of these Juul or this e-cigarette or whatever is equivalent to anywhere from 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes. So the CDC has done different studies depending on the e-juice or the e-liquid that is in the actual device. It can be equivalent to 20 to 40 cigarettes in one pod. So I've taught students that will go through 3 or 4 pods just studying for an exam on one evening. So in about 5 hours, if you just went through 3 pods, that's almost 6 packs of cigarettes you could have smoked equivalent of nicotine. So it's for an addictive substance, and you just put that much into your body, you have a very, very high chance of becoming addicted to that product after that point. And it's something that can be, a little bit easier to hide. You don't have to go outside to smoke a vape or to use a vape or to hit a vape. You don't have to do that nowadays because it's easier to hide. So it's something you have a higher risk of becoming extremely addicted to very quickly. And when you're using something 24/7, you're going to start to crave it 24/7. So it's at that point you start to realize that your life now revolves around that vape. And when your life starts to revolve around that, everything you do becomes a part of that. So whether or not you can sit through a movie, go to dinner with your friends, take that road trip you really wanted to take over summer, before you go to college, before you go to high school, you may not be able to do that anymore because who wants to stop every half an hour so you can take a hit off that Juul, but they don't want you smoking in their car? Oh, yeah, so I can also talk about that. So Juul in particular, and there's a few other companies out there that use what's called nicotine salts. So this has an acid that's been added to it to make it into a salt form. So what this does is it makes it highly concentrated. So it makes it basically a stronger form of nicotine. And it's this nicotine that is getting a lot of kids and adolescents nowadays, as well as young adults, addicted to these products very quickly. So not only are you getting the regular nicotine, from a traditional cigarette, but these have even a higher concentration of nicotine. And this one in particular, different companies, they have them basically like copyrighted or patent basically that they're the only ones that can have that product. So when you become strongly and highly addicted to something like Juul, you're going to need something like Juul to get you that that feeling or that nicotine into your system, so you don't continue going through withdrawal symptoms very quickly after using it. Do you have anything to add, Lauren? No. Yep. All right. Okay, I think that's the last question we have from online. Is there anybody else in the audience with any questions that have popped up in the meantime? No? Okay.
All right, so I would like to close this by thanking all of our community members, businesses, organizations, parents, and youth who've attended this forum. We'd also like to thank the panelists for attending and providing information important information about nicotine and nicotine addiction and how it can impact both the lives of adults and the youth. And a special thank you to the Loveland School District, ICRC-TV, Hamilton County Public Health, New Hope Baptist Church, and the LEAD Coalition who made this community forum possible.
And then I would also like to thank the wonderful youth volunteers that we've had here with us today. So we had different volunteers from UC Medical Center as well as youth ambassadors from the LEAD Coalition, which is again Loveland Educating Against Alcohol and Drugs. So if we would have the youth ambassadors who volunteered today, please come up to the front. We'd like to give you a round of applause. So these are the kids that are really getting out into their school system right there, and they're educating their friends, they're educating their peers, they're making sure that the education gets into their school system and everything. And they were so kind to volunteer their time today to come in and help with organizing this event, making sure, things, the information got out there. The people who attended here in person were able to get the information they needed, and they were able to ask the questions that they had. So, and then of course, this is the generation that this topic is affecting the most right now. So we really want to make sure we have that youth involvement when it comes to anything that's, education initiatives or anything, or policy development involving this type of topic, because this is in the end the generation that's going to be affected the most. So another round of applause. And of course, our wonderful MC, he is a high school senior.
All right. Whether you're in person or online, you are all the avenues for important information to get out to your communities and families. And for those of you here with us tonight in person, please feel free to visit the tables in the back, which is in the lobby, for more information about tobacco and lung health, identifying e-cigarette devices, and the LEAD Coalition and our youth ambassadors. Thank you all, and good night.